Trump has barely been back in office a week, and Republicans are already salivating over cutting taxes for the wealthy.
After months of swearing up and down that they were focused on lowering the price of eggs, the price of groceries, the price of gas, the price of insurance. That was what the last election was about, right? It was about inflation. It was about the amount that people were paying. That's what the last election was about. Interestingly, the very first thing that Donald Trump and the Republicans have decided to do is to cut taxes for billionaire corporations. And they're going to pay for it by ripping off working Americans.
You, of course, remember that Trump's campaign largely focused on the price of everyday goods, the price of gas, utility bills, the cost of living, and there were legitimate concerns. Despite Democrats' best efforts to assuage them, there were legitimate concerns among working people in this country that the cost of living was getting out of control. Trump promised he would deliver. He said he would lower costs. He never said how he would do it, but he said he would do it. And that was enough for millions of people to vote for him.
Now, that might sound like a political talking point. It sounds too convenient, too absurd. How can you spend 4 years pounding on the party in power about how much people are getting hit in the pocketbook? And they were. And they were. The price of eggs, the price of utilities, the price of gasoline, still in Hawaii around $4.59 a gallon. People still paying too much. And yet the first order of business is not to do anything about that. It's not to do anything about that. It is to cut taxes for the wealthiest international corporations in human history.
Now, Trump is back in office, and Republicans are saying their number one priority for this legislative session is to make the corporate tax cuts from Trump's first term permanent. How does that help address the cost of living? How does that help lower prices? And Republicans will of course say, oh, well, those savings trickle down. Since the inception of trickle-down economics, that money has never trickled down. Why would that happen now? Corporations will of course use those savings from their tax cuts to do stock buybacks, further enrich their shareholders. We've seen it time and time again. Why are people expecting different results?
But there is no way to enact $2 trillion, $2 trillion, a T, worth of cuts in Medicare and Medicaid without hundreds of thousands of people, senior citizens and poor kids, losing access to care. You are literally, this is not hyperbole, $2 trillion worth of cuts means the nursing homes shut down. People are put out on the streets. It means that poor kids don't get access to mental health services. And so what happened 8 years ago was cruel. A tax cut put on the American public's credit card, 80% of the benefits going to the very, very richest, none of it trickling down. This version that Republicans are talking about passing in a matter of weeks is even more cruel because it is the same balance, the benefit going to the very, very wealthy, President-elect Trump's friends who pay to get in and out of Mar-a-Lago, but financed immediately by cuts that are going to be devastating.
But with these tax cuts, you need to figure out what other cuts you can make up for that lost tax revenue. And that, my friends, is coming on the backs of working people. They're going to come after Medicare and Medicaid. They're going to come after food stamps. They're going to eliminate tax credits for working people, for families that are struggling to feed their kids. Millions of Americans will bear the brunt of these corporate tax cuts, and they're ultimately doing it at the behest of the wealthy. They're billionaire donors, and as Jamie Raskin describes, the cyber barons who have concentrated so much wealth that they effectively run the government now.
We've got this tremendous concentration of economic power as we've had before in our history, although it's much worse now, like with the railroads or the steel corporations. This is massive. This is conglomerates of economic wealth that dwarf anything that has come before. And these cyber barons have decided to move right into government and to have a merger of economic and political power.
When you have tech companies that have built up their power and reach and scale to the point where they are super monopolies, it's almost impossible to regulate them. They're telling the government what they should do, not the other way around.
If history is any indication, now is a moment ripe for the rebirth of a populist, progressive, antitrust, anti-monopoly movement. And the antitrust and anti-monopoly forces have always understood that economic concentration is bad for consumers, it's bad for workers, and it's bad for the democracy itself, as you get these cyber kings, in this case today, trying to dictate to everybody else what public policy is going to be.
So when you have every major tech CEO at your inauguration and you're surrounded by multi-billionaires, it's clear who's calling the shots. It's not the voters, it's not the working people, it's the ultra wealthy. But the thing is, people should not be discouraged. It's an uphill task for sure, but what Raskin says here is very important. It's going to take a populist, progressive, and anti-monopoly movement to fight back. And right now is the perfect time to create one. This is something that resonates on every part of the political spectrum. If you ask the average person how they feel about Congress, how they feel about Washington, and whether or not it works for them, they'll say no. They have no faith in institutions, they have no faith in our government, and they certainly see a problem with corrupt politicians. So Democrats would be smart to use this moment right now, this opportunity that Trump and Republicans are giving them, to single out the ultra wealthy and the billionaire class as the root of the problems in our society, the cause for this economic suffering. If done well and implemented effectively, this strategy could lead to long-term Democratic wins, but that would require them to take on some of their own donors. The question remains, will they? What do you think? Will they do it? Leave a response in the comments below.